Right, today we're going to have a look at the next section of A Christmas Carol, which is Stave 2. And this is the section in which Scrooge meets the ghost of Christmas past. He goes back into his childhood and he starts to begin the process of realising that the way he's living his life is maybe not so good and starts to begin to change. So the ghost of Christmas past is a very strange character. We're going to have a little more in-depth look at that in a second. We're going to go back to Scrooge's old school days. We're going to look at his first job when he worked for Fezziwig. And we're going to look at his first and only relationship, which was with a girl called Belle. And that all went horribly wrong because he decided he loved money more than he loved her. So let's have a little begin by having a look at the ghost of Christmas past. The ghost of Christmas past is something which is very difficult to capture. This is one representation. This tries to capture the nature of it as being very much like a candle. It says from the crown of its head there sprung a bright clear jet of light, and it carries around an extinguisher which it uses for a cap. Also the idea that what is light one instant at another time was dark, so the figure itself is very indistinct. So these are some of its stranger qualities. This is another representation. You probably recognise this from the Muppets Christmas Carol. This captures the idea that it's a strange figure like a child and yet also like an old man, as if it's an old man that's been shrunk to a child's proportions. Its tunic of the purest white, and yet it's completely different from the other representation because it's such a conflicting description that Dickens offers us. Here are some of the things which are much more difficult to capture. For example, it's described as now a thing with one arm, now with one leg, now with 20 legs, now a pair of legs without a head, now a head without a body. The contrast within it, its hair is white with age, but the face has not a wrinkle on it. The fact that the arms are long and muscular and so are the hands, but the legs and feet are so delicately formed and are bare. So it's a contrast between the strength of age and the delicacy and the gentleness of childhood, which is something which is very consistent. Scrooge is very frightened. He's very put off by it. It says that he couldn't have told anybody why if anybody could have asked him, but he had a special desire to see the spirit in his cap and begged him to be covered. And the spirit says, "What? Would you so soon put out with worldly hands the light I give? Is it not enough that you are one of those whose passions made this cap and forced me to wear it low upon my brow?" So this idea that the spirit is bright with memory and with youth and childhood, and Scrooge wants to put it out. So a bit of a summary. Perhaps the uncertain appearance of the ghost could represent the fluctuating, indistinct and changeable nature of memory. Perhaps the light glowing from its head represents the brightness of youth which Scrooge has tried so hard to forget. And since the ghost is so gentle and unthreatening, taking him back to a time before he develops his selfish, cruel and miserly ways, we know that this ghost is going to contrast very, very much with the spirits that are to come. So that's the ghost of Christmas past. And I've just made my own ghost of Christmas past extinguisher cap out of this pizza menu which fortuitously just came through the door. So perhaps that's something you might like to do as part of your revision. Anyway, let's have a little think about why it is that Scrooge is so reluctant to face his past and why he wants to put that light out so much. Obviously, there are painful memories. And the reader is immediately engaged with wanting to know why it is that he doesn't want to go back. And it's the first time we start to think that maybe the way that Scrooge is now isn't all of his own making, but he may have been a victim of his circumstances and not had the best start in life. The ghost really has to persuade him that it's a good idea to go with him. He's initially says that he doesn't want to go, and he says the spirit says, "I'm going to take you for your own welfare." Scrooge expressed himself much obliged, but could not help thinking that a night of unbroken rest would have been more conducive to that end. The spirit then says, "Your reclamation then, take heed." So what he's saying is that it's kind of the idea that we were talking about last time about one of the key themes being the possibility of change and redemption, the fact that you can make good your sins. So off they go straight away to some of Scrooge's past Christmases. And the first place that they go to is his school. And you actually watch him age from a young boy to an older boy. And every single time at Christmas, he's at school. Now, that's clearly one of the reasons why he is so anti-Christmas, because as a child, he never experienced the warmth of Christmas spirit. He doesn't experience the family Christmas, linking again to the theme of the importance of family, represented in Stave 1 by Fred. And as soon as he goes back there, he does start to become quite emotional. And it says he can smell the odours of his school, each one connected with 1,000 thoughts and hopes and joys and cares long, long forgotten. So we see a different side of Scrooge. We see someone who did have emotions and who did care, but that he's had to suppress these feelings and that he's put them behind him. The spirit picks up on this and he says, your lip is trembling, and what is that upon your cheek? So Scrooge has got his first little tear, and it's the first of many, because on the next page, on page 26, we've got his cold eyes glistening, and on page 27, he wept to see his poor forgotten self, and something gave freer passage to his tears. So he's really quite cut up to see how lonely he was as a child and how he spent those Christmases. And as a reader, we are too. The setting is so bleak. It's a long, bare, melancholy room. It's talking about the walls being damp and mossy, the windows broken, the gates decayed. So it's really not a place that you would want a child to be alone at Christmas. Not that you'd ever want a child to be alone at Christmas. You don't want anyone to be alone at Christmas. Anyway, and what happens is his little sister comes and she says, after a few years, I'm going to bring you home. And she says, yes, home forever and ever. Father is so much kinder than he used to be that home's like heaven. He spoke so gently to me one dear night when I was going to bed that I was not afraid to ask him once more if you might come home. And he said, yes, you should, and sent me in a coach to bring you, and you're to be a man. Now that means he's going to go out and he's going to earn his living, he's going to grow up. So we've got an idea here. I mean, if you were doing a psychological analysis of Scrooge, the impact that having been rejected by his father and sent to school and not given any love as a child would have on him is enormous. So as a reader, we start to really care about him. And it's important that we do care, because if we don't, then this whole book is a complete waste of everybody's time. Because if you don't care whether or not Scrooge changes, then you've actually got no vested interest in seeing how it all turns out. So at that point, we skip forward to his life at Fezziwig's. And he starts to really realise that Fezziwig as an employer had a massive impact upon him as a young man, and that he was happy to be there because Fezziwig was happy and he was generous. And it was actually nothing to do with money. It's all to do with relationships and friendliness and possibility and all of this kind of thing. So it's a scene in which Fezziwig throws a Christmas party. And he's watching, and it says that during the whole of this time, Scrooge had acted like a man out of his wits. His heart and soul were in the scene and with his former self. So he starts to really show some emotion. So we've had him crying, now we've got him showing a lot of excitement. And he has this realization, he says, of Fezziwig, the employer, he has the power to render us happy or unhappy. The happiness he gives is quite as great as if it cost a fortune. So again, it's that link between money and emotion. We talked in Stave 1 about how he doesn't understand why Fred would get married or enjoy Christmas because he's poor. And Fred says it's about love, and Scrooge has got no understanding. So again, here it's that idea coming up. And then something very, very sad happens, which is that we see him with his first and only love, which was a girl called Belle. She rejects his marriage proposal ultimately because she says, I have seen your nobler aspirations fall off one by one until the master passion, gain, engrosses you. Have I not? So basically what she's saying is, you don't love me anymore. You love money. It says, that which promised happiness when we were one in heart is fraught with misery now that we are two. And so she releases him. And he says, have I ever sought release? She says, in words, no, never, but in a changed nature, in an altered spirit. So the idea that once he starts to gain some money, he sees that as a way of getting security, perhaps to compensate for the fact that when he was younger, he had no security. And it's a very sad scene. He then has a look at another past Christmas in which he sees Belle as she is with her new husband, or her husband. And it's a really happy family scene, even though she has no money. And it says that it's a comfortable room, but it's not large, it's not handsome. And it's a chaotic scene in which the children and the father and the mother are just falling over each other and playing all kinds of games and having a great time. And he realises that this is actually what Christmas is about. And it's not about money. It's actually about family, and it's about being together. At which point he gets taken back to his own rooms, and he is exhausted and he falls asleep. And of course, we know that what we're looking forward to now is Stave 3, the second of the three spirits. Okay, we're just going to have a quick look at a few more key quotations. So, the school is quite deserted, said the ghost. A solitary child, neglected by his friends, is left there still. Scrooge said he knew it, and he sobbed. So, solitary, neglected, key words, and he sobbed is a lovely little fragment sentence, which you can always comment on. Scrooge says, there was a boy singing a Christmas carol at my door last night. I should have liked to have given him something. Evidence that he realises the impact of his actions on other people. And this is a nice quote of his appearance when he sees himself with Belle. His face had not the harsh and rigid lines of later years, but it had begun to wear the signs of care and avarice. So already he was greedy, even by that young age. And finally, these are but the shadows of things that have been, said the ghost. That they are what they are, do not blame me. And Scrooge says, remove me, I cannot bear it. So the agony that Scrooge is going through. And I think it's worth thinking about the kind of the harsh tactics that these ghosts are using. Reminds me a little bit of, that program, Honey, We're Killing the Kids, where they just kind of show these parents what their children are going to look like in a few years' time, and they're so horrifically appalled that they must change their ways straight away. It's kind of a very early version of that shock TV that we're so used to nowadays. So worth thinking about the way Dickens went about that and the kind of techniques that he was using.